Hey, Clemson family, did anybody do anything fun Saturday night?
I'm Daniel Shirley. I didn't. We'll talk about this game and maybe the worst performance we've seen from the Tigers in quite some time.
I'm Bill Zimmerman. Welcome to episode 39 of the Reign Supreme Alway podcast. You can find all our episodes at our homepage, clemsonkickoff.com. We're on Twitter and Instagram at Clemson Kickoff on each of those. Thanks to everyone checking us out at youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff. Let's just get to it. I'm not sure where to start, but Saturday night's loss to Notre Dame left everything to be desired, and the poor performance came on the heels of a bye week that really should have been used to clean things up.
I think you got it right. Leave everything to be desired and everything to be questioned. Bill, I don't know that there's a spot on this staff or on this team that should not be re-examined after what we saw Saturday night. I was going through some notes and trying to figure out the worst performance that we had seen before last night. And you go back and, I mean, there's only a few times in the past, 8-9 years that this team has lost games by double digits that weren't close. The Ohio State game a couple of years ago in the semifinals was one. The Alabama loss in 2017 in the semifinals was another one. The championship loss to LSU turned into a blowout, but it was competitive for the first half, and then LSU kind of took control. And then two that kind of stuck out to me, Bill. One was the Florida State game in 2013, where it was game day and it was, all the hype, and Jameis Winston came into Death Valley and just lit the Tigers up. And then the next year at Georgia Tech, I was at this game, 2014. Clemson goes in as the top 10 team and loses to Georgia Tech 28-6, and just looked unprepared, not ready to play, uninspired, all whatever adjectives you want to use. And I thought this game looked a lot like that. This team last night looked inept in all three facets of the game: offense, defense, and special teams. And I don't know where they go from here for the rest of this season because of that.
Well, the fact that Clemson has had only a few games like that in the college football playoff era, and usually not more than one in a year, should bring some confidence that things will get fixed. Not real thrilled about the matchup coming up Louisville all of a sudden, because they're doing a lot of things right in regard to being able to take advantage of what would be the problems that Clemson is having. Turning the ball over all of a sudden, not protecting the football anymore. Unimaginative play calling, very hard time getting the ball to the tight ends all of a sudden, struggle to move the chains. They definitely have to get the ball into Shipley's hands more. It was interesting to hear Brandon Streeter talk about maybe we should have had more dedicated run plays. We heard that a few years ago during the Trevor Lawrence tenure at quarterback as well. So not a totally unusual thing. Defensively, I think, is where maybe the defense didn't play as badly as the offense, but it almost seems a little more inexcusable. It's the same things that have been going wrong. They're still not getting fixed week after week after week. They allowed Florida State to run the ball on them. Wasn't looking great that day, but they still controlled the game, so it didn't prove fatal. Then Syracuse, again, moving the ball well on the ground, even though they focused on keeping it out of Sean Tucker's hands. And you get the bye week, you're supposed to fix something like that. And instead, Notre Dame just absolutely runs roughshod over the Clemson defense, takes advantage of matchups both physically and X and O wise. Dabo Swinney talked about that in a Sunday night teleconference call. How do you piece that back together?
Well, I don't know. I don't get paid to do that. I get paid to complain about it, and that's what we're going to do here for sure. Bill, I'm shocked, and I know I've got some thoughts on the offense as well, but I am shocked at this defense. I thought going into this season, there was enough talent on this defense to be elite. And I know there's a new defense coordinator. I know they've got some new roles on defense. All that stuff is true. But this defense has been shaky the entire season. And that's surprising to me. I just am stunned how this defense plays and doesn't tackle, fits the wrong gaps, and is all over the place, just with all the mistakes. And if it was one thing, okay, we'll fix that. But it's not one thing. It's three or four things every game where you go, what are they doing? What is this unit trying to accomplish? And they got bullied last night by a team that lost to Marshall at the start of the season. So let's remember that. I know it's a different team now with Notre Dame, and I think you have to give credit to Marcus Freeman with what he's accomplished. with this team not falling apart, this team not quitting, but they looked like much more of a team than Clemson did last night. Clemson looked like a bunch of pieces and a bunch of talent, and it did not look like a team. And that's what worries me is when you see those kinds of things, then you start to worry about, is the coaching staff going to lose the team? Because this team did not look ready to play. It did not look prepared for anything that Notre Dame was going to do. And Notre Dame looked like it was ready for everything Clemson was going to do. And, you know, I saw people on Twitter obviously going after DJ, going after, you know, the wide receivers, whatever. This loss is on the coaches. 100% this loss was on the coaches. They were not ready to play. And coming out of a bye week, I don't know how that's even possible. When you have 2 weeks to prepare and you play like that, I think that says a lot about this coaching staff.
And Sweeney said that right away. You know, this is on me. This is on the staff. We didn't have these guys ready to go. The culture is pretty deep at Clemson. I think, you know, what did I say to you? Gosh, what, 3-4 years ago, Clemson started getting all these deeper recruiting classes, more 4- and 5-star guys in each class. And I said, how is Dabo Sweeney going to adjust to that mindset of that player? These are no longer the high 3-stars coming in with a chip and trying to prove that they can outwork and outplay and find a way to win and maybe eke their way into the NFL. These are guys who come in, expect to be here 3 years, get into the league, go make some money. That's a different ball of wax. It's a different mentality. It's a different group psychology. And I don't know that that's really at the heart of it. I'm not privy to what goes on, you know, inside the facility by any stretch of the imagination. But I think there are a lot of little things going on. New coaches, new roles, maybe some new X's and O's stuff on top of that. I think there's several things that need to change. And look, they're 8-1. I mean, you know, they are doing things right in a lot of ways. But boy, did they get run off the field Saturday night.
Well, Bill, here's my question about the whole thing. Does this feel like a one-off to you, or does this feel like something we probably should have seen coming? After the way this team played against Syracuse, all of last year, you know, it felt like the last year's issues were behind this team, but now maybe we had moved on too quickly beyond that. I don't think that the issues have been moved on, or settled or fixed or any of those things. Last night or Saturday night looked a lot like what we saw from this team last year. And that is disturbing to me. And that makes me question, I think, everything about this program right now, outside of probably the head coach and some of the top players. But it feels like, I don't know. I don't think this was a one-off in my mind. This felt like something that we probably should have seen coming.
Well, and I think we saw ahead of time all the reasons this did happen. I think we saw the possibility for this to happen, or for some of this to happen, but this was their worst game of the year. And I don't know why that is coming off the bye. I don't know if they just kind of lost some momentum that had maybe been helping them tread water despite these issues. I don't know. I don't think the weather was all that bad. I don't understand. You know, it's kind of like, why do they go into the Superdome and lose, you know, no matter what they do in that building? Why did they go to Notre Dame and just play a tank of a game up there, worse than the last visit up there? So it's hard to say. I mean, no, I don't think this undoes everything, but it certainly solidifies some of the problems with this team. And maybe those problems are out there and on tape enough that other teams are going to continue taking advantage of them. I hope not, but you certainly have to look at it that way.
Well, and you can say, well, now's the wake-up call. Well, why wasn't Syracuse a wake-up call?
Bingo.
The way this team played against Syracuse for, 2.5 quarters before it woke up. Why wasn't that a wake-up call? Why wasn't it a wake-up call? Oh, wait a minute. Will Shipley doesn't have enough carries. Let's get him the ball 25 or 30 times a game and make sure that our best player has an impact on the game. Why wasn't Antonio Williams used more than he was used Saturday night? I mean, your two best offensive weapons did not get the ball enough, in my mind, from what we saw last night. You mentioned it. Why aren't the tight ends being used? When this offense was moving the ball up and down the field earlier in the season, I mean, it wasn't a highlight film or dynamic like we've seen this offense in the past, but it was much better than what we saw last year. And when that was the case earlier in the year, it's because the tight ends were being used. I mean, when's the last time that we saw the tight ends be a huge part of the game plan? So I really have to question what this coaching staff was trying to get done. I don't have any idea what the offensive game plan was last night. I could not figure that out for the life of me. It felt like they didn't want to throw the ball over the middle for some reason. And Notre Dame's a good team and a much improved team. I think as improved as anybody is in the country from where it was at the start of the season. But there was no reason to be fearful of what Notre Dame's defense does over the middle of the field. And that's what this team looked like. It looked like it was scared to do anything offensively. And that shocked me last night when I saw that.
I don't know if there were some problems opening up passing lanes that are critical to moving the ball over the middle of the field. I didn't think the offensive line had a good game. I don't think they provided as much pass protection as reliably as they have the rest of the year. And give the ball to Shipley more, I'm not sure he had any place to go with it. So, I hate to just make that my default mode to blame the offensive line, but I do think it's a question that needs to be answered by people smarter than me. Is that really the crux of the problem up front? If so, then I feel pretty good about going up against Louisville. I feel like no matter what right now, I feel good about going up against Miami. And then, South Carolina is going to come out with an edge to play Clemson this year, especially with a ray of hope with the door crack. So these things have to get fixed. Both sides of the ball, whatever it is, they got to find the right fits on defense to stop opponents' run game. They've got to find ways to make sure that they're moving the ball on offense, whether the blame lies with the receivers primarily, with DJ, with the O-line, whatever it is, figure it out and get to the drawing board and get to the practice field and get it repaired, because suddenly Louisville doesn't look like a pushover.
Well, and you talk about the Shipley deal. Here's the thing about that is Clemson's offensive line has never been dominant, right? Even the championship teams, they didn't win because they just dominated people on the offensive line, but they were creative. They ran jet sweeps. They used motion. They used deception. And Bill, we don't see that anymore. It's almost like the coaching staff for the last couple of years on offense feels like, oh, well, we've got a dominant offensive line. We're going to go right at you. And this team doesn't have that. And I don't know what they're trying to do on offense and what they're trying to get done with the offensive line. But why not use some deception? When's the last time we saw a jet sweep? I mean, remember Amari Rodgers, how much Clemson used him? Remember Artavis Scott, how much Clemson used him to use the eye candy, as the broadcasters like to say? We haven't seen any of that this year. Right. And that I don't understand. Antonio Williams is the perfect player to put in that situation. And I'll give credit to my son for that, because he said that tonight when we were talking about this. I don't know why there's not more of that in the game plan. Instead of wide receiver screens and tight end screens that aren't going to work and have not worked all year. There's got to be more in the game plan than what we've seen the last couple of weeks.
Very strange that things were dialed back. And here's the other possibility I'll float out there. Coach Dabo Swinney and this staff will not talk about injuries. If something is wrong with Uiagalelei, if something is wrong with a couple of key guys, we're not going to know about it. I mean, we heard that about Jackson Carman. Why did he get drafted so high when he didn't really perform that great at Clemson? Well, because his final year, turns out after the fact, he was playing hurt the whole time and none of us knew it. So keep that in mind. There may be some real reasons going on, but again, plan around it, scheme around it, find a way. Don't just be stubborn and say, well, this is our bread and butter, so let's go back to that. Find other ways to make a difference. And that's going to happen these last 3 games, hopefully 4 games, if they can hang on, win the division, and get into the conference title game.
Exactly. And that's why I feel like the coaching staff failed these players last night. And did the players perform? Not many of them. Not many of them played well. But I really feel like the coaching staff failed this group last night. And hopefully it's a one-off and it gets fixed and it is the wake-up call. But I'm skeptical. I'll just say that. And I'll believe it when I see it. There's not a game left on the schedule that they should lose. But I would have felt that way about Notre Dame as well. I didn't think this was going to be a blowout. I thought it was going to be a hard-fought game because Clemson's not very dynamic offensively, but neither is Notre Dame. But then Notre Dame was the team that punched and punched and punched and punched. And Clemson looked defensive. It looked on its heels. It looked timid throughout the entire game on both sides of the ball and on the punt protection. My goodness, we haven't even talked about that, how poor that was last night. And, Bill, they talked about that the entire week, since they started talking about Notre Dame. They talked about how good Notre Dame is at blocking punts and blocking kicks. And the first kick, they don't even block the guy coming right up the middle. I just can't believe that this coaching staff had this team so poorly prepared after having a bye week. So that's really has me kind of skeptical about anything that we're going to see moving forward. But hopefully I'm wrong.
Well, tune into our next episode, the Louisville Preview, for more skepticism and hopefully some reasons for optimism as well. One more thing I will say, again, just typically a loss like this does not lead. Well, some of them bent the end of the season, so how do we know? But typically a loss like this does not lead to just an unraveling of the entire year. So hopefully the next game they get out there, they have, again, that motivation, that wake-up call, if you will. I'm with you. Why doesn't the near miss signal the wake-up call? But hopefully this was it. So again, we will preview that Louisville game on our next episode, and we are glad you found us, Clemson family. Go ahead and smash that subscribe button to stay up to date. Follow us on the podcast apps. We'll keep you in touch with all the big news around Clemson athletics. Check out our homepage, clemsonkickoff.com. All our links to the major podcast apps are right there. Follow us on Twitter or Instagram. Both of those are at Clemson Kickoff. That'll help you keep up with breaking news between episodes. Well, until that Louisville preview, I'm Bill Zimmerman.
I'm Daniel Shirley. Go Tigers.